a confusing thing, but इसीलिए वो important है. You can't skip that thing. So let me take you through that ताकि try to, once I have given you the explanation and I end this class, try to think about that on your own. एक दो दफ़ा गलत होगा, but that is what you need to do. So remember this thing. We have excess demand of rupee. So basically, we want to create more supply of rupee. So what can the central bank do? You are trying to prevent your exchange rate from appreciating. ये देखो central bank के FX reserves. This I told you is the artificial way in which the central bank can create inflows and outflows of dollars and at the same time demand and supply of rupee. Artificially central bank create कर सकता है. So इसको अगर तुम्हें समझ नहीं ना आती, I mean this is confusing. So this is something again which you will have to memorize कि FX reserves when they are used and drawn upon. Used and drawn upon का मतलब ये है कि सेंट्रल बैंक के $20 बिलियन के FX reserves हैं. Using FX reserves means कि आप अपने डॉलर्स बेचना शुरू कर देते हो. The central bank start selling dollars. So central bank when they start selling dollars, तो होता क्या है कि central bank, so let's assume this is your central bank, out of $20 billion reserves that it may hold, it will go to the FX market, and if it starts selling these dollars, तो वो FX market में क्या करेगा? He'll go and he will tell the FX market that look, keep these dollars, in return I want to buy rupee. So demand for rupee will be created, whereas dollars will be injected artificially into the system. So drawing down of FX reserves, therefore dollar inflow create हो जाती है and artificially rupee की demand create हो जाती है. Whereas buying reserves, what that means is that again the central bank, let's assume, starts with $20 billion of reserves, and let's assume central bank wants कि I want to increase my reserves by $5 billion. I want to add $5 billion of reserves. This time the central bank will go to the FX market. Here it will start supplying rupees कि ये लो रुपए रखो and give me these $5 billion. So dollars will be sucked out of the system artificially. So built up or buying of reserves means dollar outflow. तुम system में से central bank has taken away the dollars. And in place of those dollars, the central bank has supplied or provided rupees. So building up of reserves mean कि तुम्हारे supply of rupee will be created. Again, I mean, look, I will, even if I give you this explanation 10 times, you will again confuse it until and unless you sit back on your own and think through this once on your own. ये तुम्हें practice करनी पड़ेगी. Why is this important? Because once you are clear about, okay, drawdown of reserves will create demand for rupee and build up of reserves will create supply of rupees. Now come back to this question. You were at this equilibrium, exchange rate of ER star. Your demand for currency has increased. That is putting pressure on your exchange rate to appreciate. You don't want it to appreciate. You want to keep it fixed. So what you do, आप artificial supply of rupee create कर दो, increase your supply, push it back to the right so that you come back to this equilibrium. How can you do that? Well, the central bank, if it builds up or buys FX reserves. Again, मुझे खुद याद नहीं रहता, so I would think about it. Okay, they will buy FX reserves, meaning central bank goes to the FX market. ये देखो मैंने भी गलत कर दिया. नहीं, हाँ, सही किए. Buying FX reserves mean central bank will go to this FX market. It will give away and supply rupees. That is exactly what we want. And in return, the central bank will buy dollars and build up reserves. And that is what central banks like China do. उनकी exports बहुत ज़्यादा होती हैं, therefore there is a lot of demand for their currency, which puts pressure on the Chinese currency to appreciate. Their government, their central bank doesn't want that to happen. So जैसी market में बहुत ज़्यादा demand होती है उनकी currency की and the Chinese currency is under pressure to appreciate, the central bank jumps in, वो अपनी currency जाके FX market में supply करी जाते हैं, creates this artificial supply, controls the exchange rate at whatever level it was at, and in return the central bank of China keeps on buying dollars. And that is why today Chinese central banks hold, I think, trillions, maybe not trillions, but billions of dollars of FX reserves. Actually, I think it is in trillions of dollars. So यहाँ पे ये चाइना जैसा मुल्क अपनी करेंसी अप्रिशिएट होने से बचा रहा है. नाउ यू कैन ऑल्सो लुक एट द अदर केस which is a situation that is faced often by poor countries like Pakistan. हमारा problem क्या होता है कि given we start the year with a certain exchange rate, let's say of ER star, हमारा प्रॉब्लम ये होता है वी इम्पोर्ट टू मच. रिमेंबर दोस बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट्स प्रॉब्लम. आपके डॉलर आउटफ्लो हो ही जा रहे हैं. यू इम्पोर्ट एंड इम्पोर्ट एंड इम्पोर्ट. दोस डॉलर्स आउटफ्लोज ऑन द अदर हैंड मीन्स कि तुम्हारी लोकल करेंसी की सप्लाई क्रिएट होती जा रही है. So for countries like Pakistan, this is our problem. We usually have excess supply of our currency and that starts putting pressure on our exchange rate to depreciate, and our central banks don't want that. They try to defend the exchange rate. So यहाँ पे उनको क्या करना पड़ेगा? Look, you are sitting at this equilibrium and you are sort of under pressure to fall to this equilibrium. So let's call this equilibrium 1, let's call this equilibrium 2. What you want is, you want to keep this exchange rate fixed at this level. You want this exchange rate to not move from this. So what can you do? Well, अगर excess supply आ गई है market में, to counter that, you would need to create excess demand for rupee. Demand अगर बढ़ जाती है, तो you will again come back to the same equilibrium. How do you create excess demand for your rupee? Well, the central banks will jump in and it will start drawing down, or it will start using its FX reserves, meaning maybe $5 billion central bank अपने निकालेगा. They will go to the FX market, they will throw away these dollars. In return, they will demand rupee. They are trying to just artificially create this demand for rupee ताकि exchange rate गिरने से बच जाए. That is the usual story of central banks like Pakistan, and that is why usually you keep on hearing about these news. जो मैंने तुम्हें कल परसों ग्रुप पे भेजी थी, उसमें भी यही बात थी. सेंट्रल बैंक के रिजर्व सिर्फ $15 बिलियन के रह गए. So poor countries like ours, they are always in this problem. FX reserves ख़त्म होने वाले हैं. Why? Because every year starting with a certain exchange rate, you over import, create too much supply of your currency. Exchange rate comes under pressure to depreciate. How do you prevent that? You try to artificially create demand for your rupee. How? The central bank uses its FX reserves, and since no central bank has unlimited amount of FX reserves, हमारे जैसा मुल्क हर वक्त इस रोने में डला रहता है. FX reserves ख़त्म होने लगे. And the next story is then that you go to IMF और उनकी तुम मिन्नतें करोगे कि प्लीज़ थोड़े से डॉलर दे दो, नहीं तो एक्सचेंज रेट गिर जाएगा. And then the IMF वो तुम्हारे से सारे वो काम करवाएगा जो तुम नहीं करना चाहते. Any questions? जो समझ नहीं आया या मुश्किल लगा तो प्लीज़ मेक श्योर यू आस्क मी अगेन. ये these are ditto things which you will have to reproduce in your exam question answers. तो कोई समझ नहीं आया तो प्लीज़ आस्क मी. Anybody, any question? नहीं. अच्छा, let me end with this thing. Again, a small thing, but questions में और MCQs में, I mean questions से मेरा मतलब है both in essay questions as well as MCQs. This can create problem. At the very beginning of this video, I told you that if you start off assuming that Pakistan's exchange rate is $0.5 per rupee, then appreciation would mean that your currency gains value and becomes more valuable. So this is where you say your exchange rate has appreciated. Your currency has become more expensive, your currency has become more valuable. Whereas if exchange rate falls to $0.2 per rupee, so that is where we say that the rupee has lost value, it has become cheaper, or it has depreciated. Now you should be able to pick all of these terminologies because MCQs or SMA, these are used interchangeably. Now the new thing that you want to know, once you know this difference between floating versus fixed exchange rate, ये जो terminology है ना, exchange rate appreciation and exchange rate depreciation, that is applicable to a free floating exchange rate. Meaning that if your country has fixed its exchange rate at $0.5 per rupee, then as long as it has FX reserves, as long as it is able to, maintain this fixed exchange rate, तब तक तो exchange rate change ही नहीं हो रहा. So there is no question of appreciation, depreciation. You are fixing it. But even the countries that fix their exchange rates, जी हसान, हसान आवाज़ नहीं आई मुझे. नहीं नहीं, मैं तुम्हें बता रहा हूँ, मैनेज फ्लोट की तरफ ही आ रहे हैं, मैनेज फ्लोट की तरफ ही आ रहे हैं. यहाँ पे let's assume अभी फिक्स पे रहो, you have fixed the exchange rate at $0.5. Sometimes what countries do is that as a matter of policy, they decide कि okay, we will still fix our exchange rate, but we will fix it at some other level, maybe at $0.8. Maybe sometimes the countries will decide कि we will lower our exchange rate and fix it at $0.2. बट जब आप फिक्स्ड एक्सचेंज रेट का जो फिक्स्ड पॉइंट है वो बढ़ा रहे हो या कम कर रहे हो, देन द कॉन्सेप्ट इज द सेम. यू आर मेकिंग योर करेंसी, यू आर फिक्सिंग इट एट अ हायर प्राइस, यू आर फिक्सिंग योर करेंसी एट अ लोअर प्राइस, बट देन यू डोंट यूज दिस वर्ड एप्रिसिएशन एंड डिप्रिसिएशन. इंस्टेड जब फिक्स्ड एक्सचेंज रेट को ही तुम हायर लेवल पे फिक्स कर देते हो तो दैट इज नोन एज रीवैल्यूएशन ऑफ करेंसी. Again, make sure you remember these things, because what you will see sometimes in your essay questions is that examiner will just tell you how can the current country create a revaluation of its currency, how can the country achieve a revaluation of its currency. तो उसमें तुम्हें revaluation का मतलब ही नहीं पता होता. So always remember this thing. Free floating में when the currency's price or exchange rate changes, it is known as appreciation or depreciation, whereas in a fixed exchange rate, when you try to fix the currency, let's assume at a higher exchange rate, then we say or use the word of revaluation of the currency, कि तुमने अपनी currency को revalue किया है कि भाई पहले से ज़्यादा कीमती है ये. Whereas if you start fixing your exchange rate at a lower value, again something that countries like Pakistan are forced to do, कि भाई foreign exchange reserves ख़त्म हो रहे हैं, so we'll try to fix it, but अब इतने reserves नहीं है, अब ज़रा थोड़ी सी करेंसी गिर जाएगी, उस लेवल पे फिक्स कर देंगे. सो व्हेन दैट हैपन्स, दैट इज नोन एज devaluation of currency. And devaluation is sort of considered to be a negative word, because usually होता यही है कि you don't devalue your currency intentionally. You devalue it because it becomes impossible for you to keep it fixed. तो आपको वो उसकी वैल्यू गिरानी पड़ती है. सो दैट इज़ अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ टर्मिनोलॉजी, बट वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टर्मिनोलॉजी. हसान, आई विल आंसर. बच्चों एक क्लास और ज्वाइन कर लो. आई नीड 5 more minutes. आई वोंट टेक यू बियॉन्ड 8, बट प्लीज़ ज्वाइन मी फॉर अनदर क्लास. ये सारा हो ही गया है, थोड़ी सी एक बात रह गई है. वी आर आउट ऑफ टाइम. आई एम स्टार्टिंग अ न्यू सेशन. चलो, लेट मी स्टार्ट. आई थिंक अदन इज हैविंग सम प्रॉब्लम. हाँ, शी हैज़ जॉइंड. चलो, अच्छा हसान, आर यू हियर, आर यू बैक? अच्छा ठीक है, क्योंकि तुम्हारा वो फ्लोटिंग वाला अब आने लगे. Actually, we have covered quite a lot of things. I'll give you a quick recap. I'll give you a summary. So this is the terminology of appreciation versus revaluation. In principle, the same things, but appreciation, remember, is a free floating exchange rate. Demand supply की वजह से currency की value बढ़ रही है. Revaluation is when you are just fixing it at a higher level. अब मुझे एक चीज़ बताओ. I have just explained to you how you can fix the exchange rate using the central bank's FX reserves. The idea is really simple. तुम्हें एक दो दफ़ा अपने ज़हन में खुद से प्रैक्टिस करना पड़ेगा कि if your currency is appreciating तो तुमने सप्लाई बढ़ानी है. So what you will do to your FX reserves? If your currency is depreciating, तुमने डिमांड बढ़ानी है. So you will have to sort of practice and be prepared for this thing. So ये एक चीज़ हो गई. Is there any other way looking at this balance of payments? Let's say आप अपनी currency, I'm fluctuating the screen. Let's assume you have this situation where your currency is under pressure to depreciate. गिर रही है तुम्हारी करेंसी वैल्यू में, सो यू वांट टू आर्टिफिशियली क्रिएट डिमांड फॉर योर रुपी. Now, one way and the main way that countries use, the central banks use, I have just explained, is the using of FX reserves. Looking back at balance of payments, can you think about any other way in which the central bank can artificially create demand for rupee in order to, stop it from depreciating? क्या चीज? Hot money flows. Remember that thing. That is the second main thing that central banks will try to do. एक वो अपने FX reserves के साथ खेलते हैं, and the other thing they try to do is they try to play around with the interest rates. Again, something Pakistan tried last year. हमारा exchange rate गिरी जा रहा था, central bank jumped in and they just increased the interest rates to an unprecedented level. उस policy का एक ही मकसद था that look, we are unable, we are running out of FX reserves. Actually, something strange happened. Our country had quite a lot of FX reserves, but for some reason they did not want to use those FX reserves. So जब currency पे pressure आया to depreciate, what they did instead was they increased the interest rates. Hot money flows आ जाएंगे, खुद ही exchange rate हमारा stable हो जाएगा. If you have to pick and choose, which one should you go for? Using FX reserves or using interest rate to fix your exchange rate? सेविंग डिपॉजिट्स हॉट मनी का मैंने तुम्हें क्या मसला बताया है? Anyone? I mentioned a problem with this hot money flow. Anyone remembers that? ये उतनी जल्दी से वापस भी चले जाते हैं. एंड व्हाट इज द प्रॉब्लम आई टोल्ड यू अबाउट FX रिजर्व्स? FX रिजर्व्स रखने का क्या प्रॉब्लम होता है? Yes, एक तो आपके पास होते नहीं है. I mean billions of dollars. We are talking about billions of dollars here. So poor central banks, they don't have so many FX reserves. So you will run out of those FX reserves. पाकिस्तान का example याद रखो. You'll run out of FX reserves, and even if you have billions of dollars of FX reserves, remember opportunity cost. There is an opportunity cost to this. Okay, so these are the small little points, and the reason I'm bringing these points is that sometimes you are asked this comparison कि central bank ने exchange rate fix करना है. Easy question would be how would they do that? A slightly more difficult question would be what are the different ways in which the central bank can control and fix the exchange rate. So उसमें याद रखो, this is the major way, using FX reserves. And the other way is sometimes central banks, they play around with their interest rates. Demand create करनी है रुपये की, उसकी value को maintain करना है. You have to prevent it from falling. You increase the interest rate, dollars will come in and demand for rupee will be created. Whereas अगर आपने अपनी currency की value को गिराना चाह रहे हो आप, then you will lower the interest rate. Suddenly dollars will move out, supply of your currency will be created और तुम्हारी exchange rate कम हो जाएगी. Anything else? Yes, the last thing that I am trying to come to from quite some time. आखिरी exchange rate तुम्हारे पास रह जाता है free floating. So sorry, free floating तो पहले है ना. Free float, totally dependent on the currency's demand and supply. Then we have said fixed exchange rate, which the central bank just fixes. Fix में याद रखो, you can fix it using your FX reserves or you can fix it using interest rate. और फिर तीसरा exchange rate regime or exchange rate system is known as managed float. Now managed float is really a mixture of free and fixed, or you can say something that is in between the two exchange rate systems. So उसमें होता ये है, again there is nothing sort of additional that you have to learn here. So let's again assume there is demand and supply of your rupee and that determines a certain exchange rate. Now अभी हमने कहा था कि one way is that you fix your exchange rate absolutely at this level of ER star. Let's assume this is $0.5 for a rupee. What many countries do, an example that comes to mind is Singapore, but most of the countries, when they fix it, basically what they are doing is they are going for managed float, where they say that, look, we have a certain band, let's say between $0.7 per rupee and $0.4 per rupee. And as long as our exchange rate floats within this range, then we will not fix it. We are not fixing it at exactly 0.5. Basically, managed float means when the central banks, they come in and they give you a certain range within which they want to fix the exchange rate. So basically, they are allowing for some fluctuation according to demand and supply. So maybe अगर सिर्फ इतनी सी demand increase करती है and therefore exchange rate appreciates to somewhere here, so central bank will say, look, we don't need to interfere. It is within our range. Similarly, supply increase हो जाती है and let's say your exchange rate falls to somewhere over here. Again, the central bank will not interfere. That look, it is changing. Our exchange rate is floating around, but it is within the range that we have fixed. Whereas if let's say supply increases a lot, if the supply of your currency increases a lot and your exchange rate falls to somewhere over here, which is even less than 0.4, तो यहाँ पे तुम्हारा central bank will start interfering. There is too much supply, your central bank will think that okay, exchange rate has depreciated, it has gone down too much. So यहाँ पे वो आएंगे, they will start drawing down on FX reserves. Drawing down FX reserves means कि सेंट्रल बैंक जो है अपने डॉलर बेचना शुरू कर देगा एंड इन रिटर्न इट विल डिमांड रुपी, दैट विल आर्टिफिशियली क्रिएट डिमांड फॉर रुपी, डिमांड का विल शिफ्ट और तुम्हारा एक्सचेंज रेट वापस उसी रेंज में आ जाएगा. सो दैट इज़ योर मैनेज्ड फ्लोट. बेसिकली एक स्पेसिफिक एक्सचेंज रेट पे फिक्स करने की बजाय यू कम अप विद द रेंज. Within that, if your exchange rate fluctuates, you let it fluctuate as if it's a free floating exchange rate. As soon as it moves outside of that range, you start fixing it, you start bringing it back within that range. That is your managed float. ठीक है? किसी और ने कुछ पूछना है? नहीं. चलो, this is a good class, went according to plan. So अभी तुमने इसके बाद से this is the first thing that you have to remember, exchange rate determination. How is exchange rate determined? पहले सबसे याद रखो, you will always start off with the explanation of free float. वो तुम फिक्स्ड एक्सचेंज रेट की तरफ भी जा रहे हो, you will need to start with free float. That exchange rate is the price of currency in terms of another currency and therefore it is determined by the demand and supply of that currency. So यहाँ पे प्राइस की बजाय एक्सचेंज रेट, यहाँ पे क्वांटिटी के आगे ब्रैकेट में rupees. Then explain where does this demand for rupee come from? Balance of payment के inflows वाली सारी transaction. Where does this supply of rupee come from? That is all the outflow transaction of your balance of payment. And then just simply say where the demand and supply intersect. That is your equilibrium exchange rate. Anything less than that will create a shortage, and any exchange rate above that will create a surplus, and therefore only E star can be your unique exchange rate. उसके बाद आ जाओ तुम, what is your fixed exchange rate? Fixed exchange rate is when your demand and supply moves around and your exchange rate moves around. The central bank either uses its FX reserves or the central bank plays around with the interest rate. और जिनको अभी तक confusion है, let me write it down over here for you. इसको रट्टा लगा लो फिर. When FX reserves are used or drawn down, इसका मतलब है central bank is throwing away its dollar and in return demanding rupee. Whereas if FX reserves are built means central bank starts buying FX reserves, start buying dollars. तो FX market में से dollar demand करेगा central bank and as a payment it will throw away or it will give or supply rupee. So ये फिर रट्टा लगा लो. Drawing down of FX reserves creates demand for rupee. Building up or buying FX reserves will create supply of rupee. So ये question जो है, this is the question that will be covered from this thing. Explain this question number 4 over here. explain with the help of a diagram how a government can maintain a stable foreign exchange rate. So जब with the help of diagram वो खुद mention कर दे तो always remind yourselves 4 नंबर काटे जाएंगे, जितना मर्जी अच्छा नंबर आंसर दे दो if you don't have a diagram. I always tell you to give all the answers with diagram, but specifically when the examiner asks for it, then you don't have a choice. So how can the government maintain a stable foreign exchange rate? It's exactly what I have just explained to you over here. Exchange rate is determined by the demand and supply. This demand and supply can change. For instance, कोई भी example पकड़ लो, whatever you have prepared. Increase the demand, that is usually what I do intuitively, और उसके बाद you will have to remember this thing कि अगर demand increase हो गई है, currency appreciate होने लगी है, you have to create more supply of rupee, so the central bank can start buying FX reserves. Diagram में show कर दो, that will shift the supply curve to the right and you can fix your exchange rate. और अगर आपने supply of rupee बढ़ानी है तो you can lower the interest rates. Lowering of interest rate means there will be hot money outflows, and as hot money flows out, that will again create supply of your rupee and you will be able to fix your exchange rate. और कोई क्वेश्चन रह जाते हैं? क्वेश्चन नंबर 5 और 6 भी कर लेते हैं so that our first part is entirely done. In August 2015, the Chinese government devalued its currency. Devalued, again remember the word here is not depreciation. Devalue का मतलब है कि सेंट्रल बैंक ने जानबूझ के अपनी करेंसी की वैल्यू गिराई है by around 5%. Explain how a government intervenes to manage the value of its currency in the foreign exchange market. So it's exactly the same question, but just be sensible about it. अगर वो तुम्हें एग्जाम्पल ये दे रहे हैं ना कि एक मुल्क ने अपनी करेंसी devalue की है और गिराई है, तो just be sensible. Use the same structure that look, demand and supply of a currency determines its exchange rate. Devaluing means that will earn you 2 more marks. कि इस बच्चे ने devalue को भी explain किया है. Devalue means that you are in a fixed exchange rate system but you want to fix it at a lower exchange rate. To do that, you will have to create artificial supply of rupee. How can you do that? You have to create artificial supply of rupee, start buying reserves, और lower the interest rate and you have your answer. So यहाँ पे मैं तुम्हें हमेशा कहता हूँ you don't need long answers if you know the exact answer. Diagram बनाओ, shift show करो and to the point tell the examiner, because you see जो मैं तुम्हें कहता हूँ ना बार बार O level वाले answers में ना जाओ, this is sort of something that central banks do on a daily basis and there is no more rocket science to it. तुम्हारा स्टेट बैंक ऑफ पाकिस्तान रोज ये काम कर रहा होता है and this is exactly how it works. Drawing down of reserves, playing with interest rate, through that they create supply demand of rupee and they try to control and fix their exchange rate. तो तुमने कोई आंसर में से ज़्यादा साइंस नहीं बतानी. And last thing that we have learned today and I want you to remember is this managed float. Again, कभी कभी अगर ऐसे तुम्हें आ जाता है ना, how can you maintain a managed float? The answer is exactly the same that you give for fixed exchange rate. कि आप अपने FX reserves और interest rate के through you can artificially create demand and supply of rupee and therefore fix the exchange rate. Managed float simply means that instead of fixing it at a specific precise value, you fix it within a certain range. तरीका उसका वही है. You have to play with your FX reserves and your interest rates. If any questions, you can ask me. I will be here for 5 minutes. Otherwise, that is it for today. कल मैं तुम्हें करवाऊँगा why exchange rate changes, क्यों ये demand और supply shift होती है, which will form the next set of questions. 5-6 common reasons हैं and they are quite simple. So tomorrow we will hopefully have a shorter class, but that is it for today. Question हो तो मुझे बता दो. If you don't have questions, you can start leaving. चलो. हाँ, why not? मैं तुम्हें बल्कि उसी के रेफरेंस से बताऊंगा ताकि this is how I want you to remember this thing. हमेशा ये जो मैंने तुम्हें कहा था रट्टा लगाओ, because you can close your eyes and bring this thing in front of you. नहीं तो पेपर पे जाके पहले 2 मिनट लगा के जल्दी से ये बना लो. हाँ, I'll get rid of this as well. अच्छा, सो एफ एक्स रिजर्व में देख यार, याद रख, सिंपल सी चीज़ है, मेहनत करनी है ना अगर असल में इसको ठीक करना है, तो रट्टा लगाने के बजाय व्हाट आई एम गोइंग टू टेल यू अपने हाथ से करना क्लास इसके बाद। मेक अ सेंट्रल बैंक है, जस्ट अज्यूम उसके पास $20 बिलियन के एफ एक्स रिजर्व्स पड़े हुए, एंड इंस्टेड ऑफ कंफ्यूजिंग योर सेल्फ कि अच्छा सही याद कर रहा हूँ गलत याद कर रहा हूँ, दो ही तो पॉसिबिलिटीज हैं, ड्राइंग डाउन ऑफ एफ एक्स रिजर्व्स और यूजिंग इट, और बाइंग एफ एक्स रिजर्व्स। जस्ट वर्क इट आउट वंस विद योर ओन हैंड्स। बाइंग ऑफ एफ एक्स रिजर्व्स पहले कर लो। What does it mean? Buying FX reserves mean that maybe central bank कह रहे हैं मैंने, again I'm using the same numbers, $5 बिलियन और लेने हैं, I want to build up my FX reserves। ये डॉलर कहाँ से आएंगे? The central bank will go to the FX market, वहाँ जाके the central bank will have to buy dollars, so उनको पे करना पड़ेगा। What will they pay? They will pay rupee। So that is where we are saying buying FX reserves, building FX reserves means you will have to first of all supply rupees, yes, then in turn you will get your dollars। So वहाँ से this idea that buying of FX reserves will create this supply of rupee and artificial outflow of dollar। FX market से जब सेंट्रल बैंक डॉलर लेके आ गया ना, तो it is for the system, for the country, it is an outflow of dollar। आपकी FX मार्केट्स में कुछ डॉलर पड़े हुए थे, सेंट्रल बैंक उठा के लेके अपनी अलमारी में बंद करके रखती हैं। So that is where we are saying there will be an outflow of dollars, artificial outflow of dollar from the system, and there will be supply of rupee that will be created if the central bank starts buying FX reserves। If you want to think about a real example of a country which buys FX reserves, so that is China। And China का problem क्या है? I shouldn't call it a problem, but they export too much, they have huge current account surpluses, और उसकी वजह से the whole balance of payment is in a surplus। यहाँ पे whole balance of payment is in a surplus, there is huge demand for Chinese currency, and therefore there is pressure on the Chinese currency to appreciate, and the Chinese government doesn't want that। So what do they do कि हमारी करेंसी की बहुत ज़्यादा डिमांड है, हमारी करेंसी अप्रिशिएट होने की कोशिश कर रही है, they start buying FX reserves। वो FX मार्केट्स में जाके कहते हैं भाई ये लो चाइनीज़ युआन, इसकी कीमत नहीं बढ़ेगी बिकॉज वी आर ब्रिंगिंग इन मोर सप्लाई, इन रिटर्न हम डॉलर निकाल के लेके जा रहे हैं मार्केट में से। सो दिस इज़ व्हाट चाइनीज़ गवर्नमेंट, चाइनीज़ सेंट्रल बैंक वुड बी डूइंग टू प्रिवेंट इट्स करेंसी फ्रॉम अप्रिशिएटिंग। Whereas पाकिस्तान जैसा बेचारा मुल्क, our problem always is we import too much, so there is a large amount of outflow, there is a large amount of deficit, the whole balance of payments end up in a deficit, which means there is a huge supply of your currency, and because of that your currency is always under pressure कि रुपया गिरने लगा, रुपया depreciate होने लगा। So your currency is under pressure to depreciate because of this excess supply of rupee। So what will the central bank do? इस दफ़ा central bank आता है and it starts drawing down or using its FX reserves, meaning कि central bank इस दफ़ा तुम्हें कहेगा कि instead of buying $5 billion of reserves, I am taking out $5 billion and I am going to sell them। I am just going to keep $15 billion। इन $5 billion का मैं क्या करूँगा? The central bank, they want to use these reserves, use them for what? They will take them to this FX market कि भाई ये लो रखो डॉलर्स। In return what they will do is कहेंगे हमें दो रुपी, we will demand rupee। So they are countering this excess supply of rupee that is putting pressure on the country's currency to depreciate। The central bank is countering that by drawing down on reserves, using reserves to create this artificial demand for rupee ताकि तुम्हारी रुपी की वैल्यू बनी रहे। बेहतर हुआ कुछ, अभी भी मुश्किल है?
जी सर, बेहतर हो गया।
अब इस सारी चीज़ को एक दफ़ा ना खुद बैठ के करो, एंड डोंट वरी इफ़ यू डोंट गेट इट राइट इन द फर्स्ट इंस्टेंस, बट डोंट मेमोराइज इट। अगर टाइम लगाने के लिए तैयार होना तो आई वुड सजेस्ट अगेन द सेम थिंग, अज्यूम अ नंबर, अज्यूम अ सेंट्रल बैंक, उससे पहले ड्रॉ डाउन करवाओ एंड सी इफ़ यू कैन सॉर्ट ऑफ थिंक थ्रू द वे आई हैव एक्सप्लेन, एंड देन उससे बिल्ड करवाओ रिजर्व्स एंड सी इफ़ यू कैन थिंक इन द वे आई हैव डन। नहीं होता ना तो डोंट वरी, मेरे साथ एक दफ़ा फेस टू फेस बैठ जाना, आई विल टेक यू थ्रू इट। दिस इज़ इम्पॉर्टेंट, ये तुम्हें कहीं ना कहीं ये क्वेश्चन पकड़ेगा ही पकड़ेगा, या तुम्हें 25 to 30 जो MCQs हैं उन पर तुम्हें ये ज़रूरत पड़ेगी, और यू विल नीड इट इन योर एसेज. सो दिस इज़ रियली इम्पॉर्टेंट. ठीक है, चल तू ही रह गया. चलो फिर, अल्लाह हाफिज़.